how often did you get the training? Because I mean, cards are changing, especially the new cards coming in and what
Mhm.
they look and feel like.
Yeah. Um, as far as training, they have you sit down with one of the senior graders for like probably a couple of days. And they just pretty much tell you they're like, yeah, if in order to get a 9.5, you need three 9.5s and a nine. And then you just got to pay attention to the grading slip that says grade what subgrades, things like that, or if it's like a minimal like review type of thing. So that was pretty much it. It was just like a couple of days, and then they kind of just like similar to that training process. They just throw cards on your desk, and then you might have a senior grader come over and say, hey, I liked what you did on this card. I didn't like what you did on this card. And then they review your order, and then they pretty much, so if you give something like I was saying before, if you give something like 8.5 centering, and they drastically change it from to like 9.5, which could make a huge difference, then they'll tell you about it. And then yeah, when they keep reviewing your stuff, you can kind of each time you can kind of review it and then kind of keep seeing like how you can improve on grading and stuff like that. And then that's pretty much it as far as the training. They tell you like what to look for in the auto, like if the auto runs off the card, like you're automatically at a nine. And then how to differentiate like an eight auto versus a nine auto, or even like a 10 auto, stuff like that. And then my biggest challenge that I thought was the toughest was when you would get some of these card like trimmers. If they tried to like trim the edges, it would be really hard to tell if the card's been trimmed. Where you almost had to like because you couldn't measure it, like because it was really tough to measure stuff even if it was trimmed, like because it's within like centimeters that something like that has, if you can tell. So that was my biggest thing, because some of the stuff that people did try to put through, where some people may or may not have caught it if they tried to trim it. There was even one instance too where a guy tried to like color a corner of like a Sidney Crosby upper deck Young Guns rookie. So that was like a popular card that people submitted, and he would color like the corner just to try to get like just to try to get the card from like an 8 to like a 9 or like a 9.5 or something like that. So, but something like that was very hard to see. So you got like a loop, or you got like a certain like even like ruler to measure stuff. So that was pretty much the whole training process.
Oh, cool. I definitely want to get into tools in a minute.
Mhm.
But one follow up to what you just
Yeah.
said. So, especially when you're going through your training, right? You're starting out, you're working with the senior graders and you're giving it a 7.5, and they're saying, well, no, Rob, this was actually an 8.5. Um,
Mhm.
did you, what, I guess, what sort of official feedback or reporting did you get from Beckett? Like, did you get any sort of on a monthly basis? Hey, Rob, this month, you were coming in at a 7, but all of your cards were an 8. I'm just
Mhm.
curious, like if you got that type of data or that type of information on ways to improve is kind of the
Yeah.
first part of the question. And then secondly would be if you did get that information, did you almost feel pressure to give higher scores or on the vice versa, lower scores?
Gotcha. Yeah. I so I remember this a couple of times. They told me I wasn't giving enough 10 subgrades. So to answer your question, like you did kind of have it in your head, like, okay, I got to make sure I start giving more 10 subgrades, because I don't want them to, keep complaining about that. And another point I wanted to make real quick was, so I would say my first 3 to 6 months were better as far as like working there, and me adding the grades of like where I felt like I was adding some pretty good value. And then the last 6 months there was just like too many like disagreements on my grades, or like you heard this, like there was too many cards that people were trying to grade too higher than what they should have been, and things like that. So that's why I kind of felt like I was like, all right, yeah, I definitely don't want to continue doing this, just because like it's not something really for me type of thing. After, so that was pretty much where I was kind of like burned out after the first 6 7 months. And then they were just, there kept being a lot of disagreements with my grades, whereas like I felt like there was too much of a leniency, or for them trying to grade too many higher cards versus what they should have just been, if and things like that. So that was kind of how I graded.
Very cool.
Yep.
So, Rob, what are there any stories or anything interesting that's happened to you or any other graders
Hmm.
around influencing the grades? Like, I don't know. I'm just coming up with
Yep.
ideas. Like, did anybody ever include cash and say, "Hey, this is yours," if the
Yep.
card grades well, or courted by? Did they offer a vacation to Hawaii for like a black label? Like, has
Yep.
anything crazy like that happened there or to you?
Um, so not to me personally, that I had heard of, you know, where a person would throw you extra incentive, and if you gave them certain grades, things like that. I always felt like there was some shadiness going on where, let's say you have something really specific where like a guy sends in like an orange refractor or something like that, numbered out of 25, and you happen to know it's like that person's order or that person's card, and then hey, you can just throw them a quick 9-5 with like a 10 auto, and then that person that gets that card, they kind of just throw that, they know who that grader is, and they kind of just throw that person, let's say, a couple extra $100 or $500. So something like that could have went down, but I didn't personally know if that was going on. The one instance that happened with me was, my dad did submit with that guy still from Texas that got me the job. So we knew like when that guy was submitting orders. So it was pretty funny. Some of his cards actually showed up on my desk, the guy that I was friends with. So like if I wanted, so like one time I recognized a few of my dad's cards, and I tried to like give him, like some favorable grades to like the best of my ability, things like that. But I didn't slap on like all kinds of like black labels or tens or anything like that. So, but that was the only instance where I kind of like did something like that. But to answer your question too, it could have been that's what I always had in my mind, that it could have been going on with like some of them graders, because these guys would be sent off to like card shows, and you don't know what's going on or what some of these dealers are telling them, if they're the only person there that's representing Beckett, and say, hey, by the way, if you give me a 9-5, I'll throw you an extra 3 400. It's like that adds up, like so.
Oh yeah.
So I think a lot of that could have been going on. Whereas like especially for some of these senior graders, too, they were sent off like each month to all these different shows. So a lot of that could have been certainly happening.
Yeah, they were meeting a lot of people at these shows. I mean, that's the whole
Yep.
point of them, right? You're
Yep.
a bit of a marketing person while you're at the show, while you're also doing your job of grading cards. So,
Mhm.
oh
Quick
boy,
steak dinner for a 9-5, or whatever, something,
Yeah.
a couple $100
sure.
for the slots if you're in Vegas.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
Back to the point you made around, the example of some of your father's cards ending up on your desk.
Yep.
I mean, shoot, that's like human nature, right? Your father's cards are ending up on your desk, and
Yeah.
you're that that was a tough spot for you to be in. Um,
Mhm.
but I think in my mind, if that were to happen, I would say to myself, well, at least the senior grader is going to check my cards, right?
Yeah.
So if
Yep.
I try, if I give it a 9, maybe it passes the senior graders, or maybe the senior grader brings it down
Yeah.
to an 8.
Yep.
That's yeah, that puts you in a tough spot. But at the same token, I don't. That would be tough to avoid. That would be
Mhm.
tough to avoid. I would say with any grading company, shoot. I mean, with all the people you meet, I mean, chances are once in a while you're going to get a card of maybe somebody that you know. Um, so this kind of falls into that same story of the Leaf story example you gave.
Mhm.
Not exactly the same, but have you seen or heard, maybe it could even be rumors, I guess,
Mhm.
of graders switching cards where maybe they have a
Um,
7 and a 10 comes in and they flip them and they take the
yeah,
10.
that I don't think that would be possible just because
Okay.
there's so many cameras like in the building. Um,
Hmm.
I have heard that some people have dropped stuff. So we did witness that where a couple times something was dropped and then they either had to pay the customer for the card or different things like that. But those were pretty rare instances.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. There's a lot of
Yeah.
cameras in there, a lot of
Yeah.
security. It's
Yeah,
even interesting.
they have a grading room and there's all kinds of cameras in the grading room and
I
Hmm.
things
mean,
like
if
that.
somebody's really good at poker, the ace up your sleeve, right? You got you
Yeah.
just swap out
Yeah, because
the
then
Jordan rookie.
if something goes because if something goes missing, like because they have it all tracked after it got submitted with the verifiers. So after the verifier would verify the order, then it would be dropped off like in the bins to the graders. So that was kind of the process. So you wouldn't just be able to like swap something out unless you had that like unless you were like really fast at doing it or something, or if you were going to take the chance to get caught on camera.
Hmm. Um, let's actually just get to just the grading in general. And Rob, I know you've touched on some of this already,
Mm-hmm.
but that orange refractor gets put on your desk, comes out of a bin.
Yep.
What are you doing? Where can you just walk
Yeah.
us through like the steps you're taking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm doing when I get the card out of the bin, you take it out of the like the grading like sleeve where you would submit cards, like how everyone does. And you're just kind of looking in your head like what sticks out that might be wrong with this card. Like let's look at the centering, let's look at like the autograph is good, kind of feel the edges, look at the corners, check out the surface. So once you kind of examine the front of the card, then you kind of want to turn it over to the back. And the back is not as important as the front, even with like centering nowadays or like with and especially that I think that's especially centering for sure. And when you're kind of looking at this, you're kind of saying to yourself, okay, like that corner might have like slightly something on it, so you're already kind of down to like a 9 on the corners. And you're kind of just evaluating each corner before you determine that grade, and then just kind of look at the centering was always the thing I would do first. And then just look at like, hey, this looks like 9.5 centering, or this might even be a 10 centering. And then just kind of have that in your mind. And then, let's say using that same orange um, refractor, there might be some slight print lines or scratches on the surface. So, you know, assuming that's the case, you're probably going to get like an 8.5 for centering. Just if you see a few print lines or if you see a few scratches, like on stuff like that. And then kind of look at the auto, make sure the auto is like a clean, crisp auto. No, like the rule of thumb was if the auto had 2+ streaks, then you're kind of at like a 9. Or if it has one streak in the auto where the ink is kind of faded, then sometimes you could still get away with a 10. But I always thought like even two, if it had definitely more than 2 streaks, then you're kind of at a 9 auto. But if it had 2, like you're kind of borderline for a 10. So just different nuances of like things like that, and then just kind of like have your little scorecard and say, okay, 9 corners, 8.5 centering, and then just kind of go down the line. And then you have to do all of this like within a span of 2 minutes, and then that was pretty much my process. And then put the card back in the sleeve, and then on to the next one, and then over and over and over. So,
So when you're doing a card that doesn't have subgrades,
yep.
are you still going through that process in your head of, all right, this corner I think is the corners are probably a 10 and this is a 9.5, and then you kind of compute in your head, like add that all up, take an average of 4,
Mhm.
and this card's a 9.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the same process. So like they actually do that process with they still I don't know how many people still use it. They still do that process with BCCG. So that means that like if the card is in an 8.5 or higher condition, it can be a BCCG 10. So you have to grade it within the normal standard of BGS 8.5 standard. And as long as you think it's higher than in 8.5, you just literally look at the card and just say, okay, this is going to get at least a BGS 8.5, BCCG 10, and then on to the next, like over and over. And that has no subgrade. So I did some of those orders occasionally. Some people did do those, I think, because they're like $10 a slab or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. They're still pretty cheap. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we definitely did do the same process when there was no subgrades though, too, to answer your question.
Okay. What sort of tools did you use? Like magnifying glass? Like
Yeah.
what did you have for technology that you were
I
using?
had the loop where like you have to look real close to your eye with it, and then I also had the ruler sometimes to try to measure stuff to see if it was trimmed. But that was pretty much it. And then I always thought too, like that I was surprised they didn't wear gloves. Because I know like a lot of breakers wear gloves
Mm.
where they didn't require gloves on stuff because sometimes like when you're sitting there working in that environment, going through all these cards, you might develop like sweat, like slight sweat on your fingers, and they might get on people's cards and things like that. So I didn't wear gloves, or no one else really did, but that was pretty much it for tools.
Interesting. Okay. Hmm.
So, Rob, I wanted to get back to this on-site submission at shows because to me,
Yeah.
I thought it was very official and it goes in a room and there's cameras and everything. But it sounds like from what you were describing, it's almost like I don't know, like spring break or something. Like it's like Raiders
Yeah.
gone wild. So I imagine you've got a ton of security and a ton of cameras at the Beckett offices. But
Mm.
when you're on the road and you're at a big card show, what is that like? Like, what's the security like there? I know you said it's easy to get, bribed or whatever, a few
Yeah.
$100 because there's not much supervision, but what does that all look like in terms of keeping an eye on things?
Yeah. So I myself never went to a show as a grader. Like I wanted to go, but for whatever reason I never went to one when I was there. But from the process that I've heard, one grader usually goes to like let's say like a Philly show or like a show in California or something like that, and then they send all of them to the national. So as far as like what's happening at the shows, like I was saying, you could have, let's say, a person like, for example, I don't know how if they still actually do this current process. When I was still there, they had what's called raw card review. So it's like parentheses RCR. So they would give some of these cards like a 9.5 like raw card review, and then what that meant is the card would just have to be, slabbed later on, and then they would almost have to get like guarantee that, grade and things like that. Now I don't think they do too much more raw card review just because of like, people messing with slabs and things like that. And then as far as what's happening at these shows, like I was saying, like you don't know like what type of um like what type of like customers are doing coming up to some of these graders. They could say, hey, I see you work at Beckett, or they could pull some of these guys to the side and they could be throwing them a couple $100 to give them, extra grades, things like that. And then if they're the only ones there representing Beckett as the grader, and how would you know what's happening? It's almost like when PSA sends like an authenticator to like authenticate stuff, and they have to decide like um, to pass or fail it. But at least like with that, you're going to know if your autograph is good or not good, and they still have to pay for the submission fee regardless, or the authentication fee. But with grading, it's a lot more subjective, where it's almost like you don't know what's happening at some of these shows where it's only one grader going and they're representing Beckett, and then they could say, hey, this guy did give me an extra couple $100 to give me some higher grades. So something like that could be still happening on the inside. Was what the rumors that I heard.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's probably no way to tell, right?
Yeah.
What happens
Yep.
at the card show stays at the card show.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, let's keep things on the up and up. No
Okay.
no bribery involved.
Yep.
Are there any tricks for your submission to get better grades?
Um, so I believe so. Because I feel like there's a small percentage of people that found a way to beat the system. And to answer that question, I still think there's a ton of people out there that are cleaning cards, or altering some of these cards that are trying to get them to be higher grades. There was even a guy that he had a Facebook group that was called like Dr. Beckett. That was like his name, and he was a guy that people would send their cards to. And let's say you could have had like a Mike Trout Bowman Chrome auto, and it could have been graded like a 7, and he could have gotten like a 7 to like a 9, which you're talking like thousands of dollars difference. Like,
Huge.
and the reason why I know this is because I kind of wrote about it in like a book that I had published about sports cards. So I definitely found out who this Dr. Beckett guy was. And I don't know if their Facebook group still exists, like, or even if it's still that name, but that small percentage of people is finding ways to like take advantage of some of the people that are, working at Beckett. And because you can't tell if a card's been cleaned or if it's been altered. Like it looks, unless they trimmed it, and then, you know, things like that. But there's things happening, where people are definitely doing that. And I always thought that was kind of like people were finding ways to beat the system for sure.
So
So
Rob, sorry.
the
Go ahead.
altering piece, I can see,
Yeah.
that to me feels, it's a bit shady, right? If you're trying to like trim up the corners or paint the corners.
Yeah.
But on the cleaning side, like I
Mhm.
almost equate it to, an old painting that you're going to put up for auction and it's been sitting in an attic for 50 years, and
Yeah.
you're going to take it to somebody to get cleaned and maybe
Mhm.
reframed before it goes up for auction. So that is interesting. I've definitely heard about the cleaning services that
Mhm.
are out there as well. One last quick thing. So that was more on maybe tricks to get a better grade. What about your submission itself to get it through the process faster? Anything that you recommend people do? Keep things organized.
Um, I when I think sometimes when I was there, when they would do like the 10-day order, um, I think personally you get, better grades when you spend like the higher service levels. Because like for example, when your card is in a huge backlog, and a grader is just trying to like rush through it, or um things like that, or don't really care for it, or things like that, they're not like stuff was sitting there for like a year plus, so it's almost like they don't really care what like your card got from like a year from now. They want to care about their current customer that just dropped like a couple $1,000s on like a 10-day order. Whereas like those are the orders that definitely take preference.
Interesting. Do they spend more time on those orders? I know you said you spent 2.3 minutes. Like if somebody sends in, I know myself personally, I sent in an autographed Jordan rookie. I spent couple grand to get that turned around in 5 days. Is that like
Yeah.
3.3 minutes or is that like 30 minutes?
No, that's the thing. Like, that was just me that would spend 2 minutes. Some of these guys only spent like 30 seconds to even like 45 seconds on a card. They wouldn't care if like your card's worth like 50 grand or if your card's worth like $50.
Wow.
Yeah. So like so there's some people there that that's just their job. Like they don't they've seen so many cards and they're already like burned out from the process that they just say, "Oh, here's here," because we would hear, "Oh, I got a Jordan rookie here," or "I got this," and then it's just to them it's just like another card because
Wow.
they're doing probably roughly 5 days a week at like almost 400 plus cards. They're looking at almost 2,000 something cards a week. You times that by a whole year, you're looking at 100,000, and that's not even counting card shows and things like that. So in office, they're doing close to 100,000 cards each grader just in office, not counting card shows.
Wow. Here I was thinking my card went to like a special place. Like
Yeah.
4 or 5 people sat around the card. They talked about it.
Debated.
Maybe had a sandwich while they thought about it. But nope, it was right next to like the 2019 Jason Tatum rookie card. Just bing, bing, bing,
Yeah.
bing, bing. That's
Yep.
crazy. Um,
Yep.
so Rob, one other question. This kind of goes back to getting better grades. I heard like you can almost like stack a deck. So you'll take 4 or 5 just sevens, eights, right? And you'll
Mhm.
you'll stack them in front of like a really beautiful potential 10. So you're like, you
Mhm.
look at them, it's like crap, 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 crap. All right, that one's good. Let's hook them up.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference at all or nah?
Yeah, I think so. Just because, like, so I've also heard this too, like, or what I also even experienced this too as well. If you send in, like, let's say the same card, like all back to back to back to back, it's giving the grader like a familiarity to how to grade that card easier. Whereas, like, if they just gave one a 10 and they see another one that doesn't look nearly like as good, you're gonna get a 9. Like that's so like you if you do send in like let's say some stuff that's not that good, but then they do see some stuff that is good mixed in with that, then you tend to get a better grade for sure. But if you're sending in, let's say trying to think of like a good example. If you're sending in, let's say like a prism Luka Doncic or something like that, like a rookie, right? They might give like 2 9.5s of that, or they might give like 2 9s or something like that. It's going to be pretty rare to get 4 9.5s all back to back to back to back to back. So, but that would be my recommendation. I wouldn't send in like all of them together and try to mix them up in your order.
Crazy. Wow. LZ, my goodness. I feel like my mind has been blown. I've learned quite a bit about behind the curtain and the process here. It's been pretty wild. Rob, thank you for sharing your experience at Beckett. And I think that, all funny stuff aside, I think that this episode will it will help us understand how to grade cards more effectively, how to prepare our submissions for better grades, and take a lot of proactive steps to help us. So thanks again. All right, everyone. We don't usually do this, but LZ and I were just so stunned by this episode that we actually took a couple days and kind of reflected on everything we learned. And LZ, this was wild, man. I mean, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I mean, just we've taken the past couple days, we've listened to the audio back. And I think it was really good that we listened to the audio because I know when I was when we were talking to Rob, I feel like my at some points at least, definitely at some points, my jaw was like on the floor. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, what is this guy saying? What did he say? Wait, what did he say? And I was sitting there with my notebook and I was trying to take notes. And I'm like, this is bonkers. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we're able to listen to it. And yeah, to your point, we had to talk about this. My initial gut reaction is maybe in some cases it is like, okay, I'm not surprised, right? Like I kind of needed to hear it from him to be validated a bit with like, yeah, all right. It sounds like some shady things, shady things happen. I think when you're talking about big money and big money is getting thrown around, people look for opportunities, and Rob certainly shared a few of those with us. I mean, he did caveat a lot of his things by saying they're rumors. He's heard about this. He hasn't seen it firsthand. But some of these stories were so elaborate that you have to think at least some of them were real, Nick. I mean, I have a couple things that I want to bring up, but what was your gut reaction before we get into specifics?
My gut reaction was similar to what you just said. I had a feeling, I had a vibe. I kind of thought things were done a certain way, and I was kind of like reassured, not reassured, it's the wrong word. I was stunned, really. Like I was like, my goodness, he graded his father's cards. Like that actually happened. Um, and like just some wild stuff that happens on the road. And yeah, like it and quotas and stuff like that. It really validated everything I thought. So it was a little, I guess like it was concerning to me, a little concerning.
Yeah, it was concerning. You were kind of going into that interview thinking, well, we're gonna think positive. We're gonna think positive. Like everything's on the up and up. And again, when big money's getting thrown around, everything is not on the up and up. One of the ones that stuck out to me was the whole Leaf employee that was working for them. And I just think it's crazy. If this is true and they hired a Leaf employee to do grading, like that alone, like let's not even talk about the black labels. Like that alone is such a conflict of interest
Yeah.
to allow that to happen. And then the whole black label, I think he said there was like what, like 130 black labels that the guy created. And in my mind, I'm like, "Well, how is this possible?" And then I immediately started thinking about if that guy, which I'm sure he did, sold a lot of those. I feel so bad for every one of those people that has one of these cards because they're not legitimate.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
And there should have been oversight too. Like, okay, this guy's got like they're doing it. It sounded like it was like one black label per person per year. He didn't say it, but he kind of said it. And then it's like this guy rattles off like 100 or whatever.
In a weekend, Nick.
Yeah, like don't you like have some kind of our government has checks and balances. Shouldn't there be like at least one backstop to like prevent that from flooding the market?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently not, which is it's just wild.
That is nuts. That is just so nuts. I just wonder where those cards are. And maybe at some point we need to do like an investigative like rabbit hole, try to find these cards and like search them up and see where they are. I think that would be kind of an
Ooh,
interesting
I love those. So
yeah,
maybe I'll go
sleuthing
do that.
exercise. Yeah, you're good at those. You're good at those. Yeah. That would be good. You touched on kind of the shows, and I'll let you because I know you have some opinions on the shows. The other big one that stuck out to me was, and I guess I don't know if there's really a way to avoid this, but it was the whole premise of when big submitters, big dealers are pushing, they're sending a thousand cards in, and there is preferential treatment. There is. And again, I don't know how you kind of hide that from the grader. There probably is a creative way to do that. But the piece that made me feel a little icky was either a senior grader or his manager are coming like directly to his desk, like pointing out like this is a big dealer or a big grader. That immediately would put pressure on anybody,
Yeah,
anyone.
like here's a box from normal people, and here's a box that wink wink you need to pay a little extra attention to.
Hmm.
What are you gonna do? It's like your boss or your boss's boss. Like, what are you gonna say? Like, of course you're gonna bend to that. It's
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, you
That
are.
was one that was bugging me.
Nick, it almost makes me think, because I know you and we like to submit directly to these companies. We don't go through a third party. But if these
Uh-huh.
third parties are getting better grades, maybe you and I need to get a little more comfortable with going through a third party to get our cards graded.
You know something else, Z? I love testing and learning. This is a very good A/B test, right?
Yeah.
You get a couple of cards, you make sure they're identical, and you send them down these different paths. And
Hmm.
over time, see what happens. You can actually test this. So I agree. It makes me rethink direct submitting.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh man, how about the road shows, right? I never thought of like, Beckett's there and they're centralized and you have an office and you have cameras everywhere. He kept saying there's cameras everywhere. You can't really get away with much, right? But these big regional shows, the Philly show, the National, the Burbank Card Show, they have like on-site grading there. Beckett and PSA often do that. Other companies do as well. And it's probably like 3 employees, like 5. They're all having fun. They're out. It's kind of like a fun trip, right? It's a little bit of work and fun. And it sounds like there isn't cameras everywhere at all. Um, and there's a lot more leeway and a lot of things can be done. I mean, again, he didn't outright say it, but you find a grader, take him out to a nice steak dinner,
That's it.
wine and dine, um, some money for the slots if you're in Vegas, whatever it takes.
Hmm.
And then you
Hmm.
say, hey, I'm just, just letting you know, I'm submitting a card tomorrow if it comes across, just letting you know it's mine.
Yeah.
And then I can just picture the conversation. Oh man, you're the best. I love you, man. I'm going to give you a great grade. I
Hmm.
guarantee you that has happened. I mean, things like that happen in life, right? But the problem with grading is you're supposed to be impartial. You're like a referee, and it's just I don't like that the referee can be swayed. It bugged me.
It's like the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. It would be like finding an auditor of the FDA and trying to wine and dine them. There's a ton of controls around not doing that. Um, but yeah, I mean, a good steak and a nice glass of scotch goes a long way, Nick, right? You can
Yeah,
influence. So yeah, that was it was definitely shocking. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, right? But it sounds like more controls need to be put in place. Now, he worked there a few years ago. Maybe more controls are in place now,
yeah.
right?
It was a while ago. And
So
to his credit, he had a lot of pride for what he did. It sounded like he really cared, and he kind of fought back a little bit.
mhm,
So I do respect him for that. Obviously there were some crazy things like grading his father's cards, but he didn't specifically ask for those cards to be placed on his desk. They just ended up there.
correct.
And that's not his fault,
Mm-mm.
and so I want to say, like, I'm not just crapping on the grader. Like, he really seemed like he had a lot of integrity, to be honest,
Oh, totally.
and
No,
kind
I,
of
I don't want
did
it to
his
come
best.
across. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I don't want it to come across at all that we're crapping on him. I don't think we are at all. I totally agree. He kind of kept reiterating that he seemed to be a lot stricter than a lot of his peers.
Yeah.
And to the whole grading his father's cards, I had pointed it out in the episode. Like at that point, he's relying on the senior grader to make sure that everything's on the up and up. So, that's all you can do, right? There's double checks. It's like building apps and building software, right? Coders, engineers, they have QA. They have people who have to review their code and their software. So it was good to hear that graders, at least at Beckett, I can't speak for the other companies, but at least there's kind of multiple checks involved, which is good. Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
how about this Pokemon King they had at Beckett, right? Like this one dude, his only job was Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, that whole kind of category.
Yeah. TCG cards. Yeah.
Right. And
Hmm.
he was like the one guy, right? And that one, like whatever he said went, like whatever he
Yeah.
grade did, they trusted.
Hmm.
And it seemed like that guy even asked for help and asked for like that is an amazing amount of power. I guess what was eye-opening for me was like, oh, Beckett's like a big company, right? It's like big, like Walmart or Target or whatever, right? but no, it almost operates like a startup in a way where you've got these little pockets not really communicating to the other pockets. And hopefully that's changed, and hopefully they've grown up as they get bigger. I don't know how it works at PSA, but that was just so interesting to me. You think you're sending to this massive company when in fact it's this one guy that's taking all those cards, and it's like his opinion.
with no senior grader, no double
Cor-
checks. So you
Correct.
completely destroyed the control that I just talked about, Nick,
Done.
with that
No,
example. It's gone. No, there wasn't one.
no controls. No controls. It's wild.
Oh
It's wild.
boy.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad that we talked to somebody. I've been, just for the audience, I think, since we started this pod, I have spent a year trying to find somebody willing to talk. And they, every one that I ran across was fearful and worried
Mhm.
and didn't want to like share some of this stuff. So again, kudos to the grader. I'm really happy he was on and shared some of this, because I think it's important for all of you to know, because all of us grade cards and all of us will continue to grade cards in some way. And this is going to help me definitely personally. So hopefully it helps the audience as well.
Yeah, it is. It's going to help me as well. I want to echo that. I also want to echo kudos to Rob for coming on, because yeah, it probably does take some guts to do what he did. To your point around you've gotten rejected from a lot of other people. But Rob was great, and we talked to him before the show. We talked to him after the show. He actually shared even a couple more nuggets with us after the show. So I think there's the opportunity to have a kind of a second episode and have Rob on again. Little
Right.
teaser for the audience, but there was some additional things that he shared, kind of once we stopped. Um, but yeah, this was very eye-opening. I'm confident the audience is going to love this. And please, audience, give us feedback, especially give us feedback on maybe questions you wished we were able to ask. Because unfortunately, we weren't able to get to everything. Like we try to be respectful for all the guests that we have on, with the time we allot. But please let us know with feedback on additional questions, and Nick and I will try to hunt down either another grader or get Rob on again.
Yeah, this likely won't be the last time we do an episode like this, because
Mhm.
I think it was a really good one. So awesome. Cool. All right, LZ. Is that all
All
we
right.
got for this one?
Yep. Till next time, Nick. This is a great
Excellent.
one. All
All
right.
right. Thanks, everyone.